The House is getting prepared to go forward with impeachment. You're already starting to hear some Republican senators are like, oh, God, this is going to be embarrassing. And
it already is.
It is embarrassing. But this is the dilemma that the Republican Party has, is that, you know, there are, I don't know, 5 or 6 now senators, maybe 8, that have to run in states that aren't deep, deep red. And it's embarrassing, the Republicans in the House. It's also embarrassing for, you know, some of the House delegates in states that aren't as deep red. You know, there's New York Republicans. And remember, they only have now, what, is it like a 2-seat majority? Or will shortly be a 3-seat majority, I should say. So there's a lot of people on the precipice. And the more that Republican senators, even if it's a couple, come out and poo-poo this thing even before it gets to the Senate, that they don't even feel obligated, that they actually think it's a political liability to pretend that there's even like an argument for impeachment in this instance, the more it puts pressure on those Republican lawmakers from New York, Republican lawmakers from California, those 18 that were elected in Joe Biden districts. And it doesn't help their case that the guy essentially in charge of leading the sort of like impeachment to the water, as it were, before it starts to drink, James Comer, seems completely inept. It's as if, like, honestly, it's like every time we see an interview with this guy, it's like, did someone just wake you up from a nap and say, get on television, and you had no time to prepare? Here is James Comer. He's got his James Comer logo backdrop, so he must know he's going to be on TV. But he doesn't seem to have the answers prepared, so much so that even Jake Tapper, of all people, is like,
Or is the problem that he does have the answers? Right?
Next question is, can you name one piece of evidence or testimony that directly and credibly connects President Biden to any of this proven misconduct? Proven.
I can name 2.
Okay.
First of all, we believe President Biden committed a quid pro quo when he leveraged $1 billion of U.S. taxpayer money in Ukraine in exchange for firing the prosecutor, Shokin, who was investigating Burisma, the company that Hunter Biden just got charged with receiving substantial sums of money and not paying taxes. We believe that Joe Biden was directly involved in the termination. We believe this, Jake, because he admitted it on tape. That's one crime.
The entire. We'll get to the second in a second, but just for our viewers' awareness, the entire Western world wanted Shokin fired.
Okay, can you pause it for a sec? Because this is entirely different. They're trying. This whole thing, this impeachment stuff, is retaliation for the Democrats impeaching Trump twice, right? And those were for, one, first, the Ukraine thing, which I'll get to in a second, but 2, obviously, the January 6th stuff. But the difference between what Biden did and what Trump did is that Trump tried to, like, essentially get dirt and withheld aid in order to get dirt on his political opponent, Biden, for purposes outside of what the government's role was. What Biden was doing in his capacity as vice president at that time, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, was basically stated and confirmed U.S. policy. He was literally just doing his job. That might be in part why he admitted it on camera.
Yeah, he admitted it on camera as, it wasn't that he admitted it on camera. His job was to go on camera. He was sent by the U.S. government to go on camera and say this out loud. Because this is what the policy was, the stated U.S. policy, whereas the stated U.S. policy, the statutory obligation was to give this money to Ukraine for, and people can argue whether they should have or shouldn't, but it doesn't, that's irrelevant. Give this money to Ukraine for aid, and Trump was like, I may not let it go.
Right, but you got to do something for me.
Yes, and it's and Jake Tapper's about to make at least the former point that, like, this was public policy, not just U.S. public policy, but it was literally Western Europe, because they felt that Shokin was corrupt. And Ukraine has a corruption problem. And it was a lot worse, but it still remains even. But go ahead.
We'll get to the second in a second, but just for our viewers' awareness, the entire Western world wanted Shokin fired. Like, it wasn't just President Biden. The entire Western world, the European Union,
he's laughing at him.
The G8, there were a lot of people, including Republican members of the House and the Senate, who wanted Shokin fired. It wasn't just like Vice President Biden, conspiring with himself. So, okay, what's the second one you wanted to talk about?
Well, the second one, clearly with the Foreign Agents Registration Act. That's why the judge in Delaware kicked out the sweetheart plea deal that Weiss originally negotiated. Remember, just a few months ago, Weiss was trying to negotiate a deal that would have given Hunter Biden blanket immunity. He wouldn't have had to been charged with any serious crime.
Right.
So the Foreign Agents Registration Act is the most obvious. And who was he lobbying on behalf of? I mean, he was lobbying on behalf of our enemies around the world. Who was he lobbying? He was lobbying his father.
Right, but we don't have any evidence that he carried any. I don't know what evidence there might be about Hunter Biden and the Foreign Agents Registration Act. You might be right about that. I just don't know what then Vice President Biden might have done, and especially in those 4 years where he was not doing anything, he wasn't vice president or president. But let's move on to some other questions, because you've called Hunter Biden to testify next week before your committee, December 13th. You've said if he does not appear, you will hold him in contempt of Congress. Hunter Biden has said, and his lawyers, that he's willing to testify publicly. He just doesn't want to do it behind closed doors. He's afraid Republicans will leak his remarks and they'll put them out of context. Why not just allow his appearance to be public? I have to say, just as a journalist, I'm really, as you just generally know, I like the transparency. Ask him anything you want. I would like to see it.
Jake, put our investigation, put my investigation next to Adam Schiff's, and you tell me who's been more transparent. Every single bit of evidence that we talk about, we cite. We publish 4 bank memorandums, which show.
All right, what are we doing on the rest of this? Do we, or is there anything else after that? In the second instance, the idea that that there is no evidence that Hunter Biden was lobbying Joe Biden to do anything.
Yeah.
Other than to loan him money to buy a car, or to give him money so that he could go and spend it on God knows what.
And the evidence they present that he was influence peddling is that he would sometimes call his dad, and his dad would pick up, and he would do it in front of other big shots, right?
And talk about the weather is what the testimony was.
But that was the closed door testimony too.
The closed door testimony.
Their star witness.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's so interesting that like all of these kind of major players, including the central connection for the Chinese Communist Party and Biden and Ukraine and Biden, Hunter, his son, is like not going to be, they don't want him front and center if they think this is as explosive, nor did they want his top associate, the person who was supposedly working on this with Hunter. They didn't want that in public either.
It's fascinating. They're just playing to a very, very narrow audience. Well, not very, very narrow. Probably at least 45% of the audience.
There is one other funny part if you want to watch it.
Let's just see it.
More incredulity from Tapper.
Yeah, it's just so funny.
It's closed door deposition.
So that was an investigation. That wasn't an investigation of Ivanka Trump. That was a separate investigation. But in any case, I guess my other question is just, isn't something better than nothing? Why not just jump at the opportunity to grill Hunter Biden on national television? Here's your chance. You're the dog that caught the bus. Here it is.
This isn't about politics. It's not about theater. My job, I know the media, and I like you, Jake. I know the media would like to have a big public show, and that would be very entertaining. But my job is not to entertain.
Show. Yes, it's me.
Right. My job is not to entertain you all. My job is to get the truth. When you have a
that's pretty good.
Which is why I want to hide all of this information from the press. My job is not to get to the truth.
Yes, it's me.
It's just sort of amazing that Jake Tapper, and Jake Tapper is almost like purposely laughing in front of his face.
Yeah.
It's not like he can't contain himself. It's like, I'm going to laugh in his face.
Yeah.
Because this is a joke. and this is relevant because I think like, you would expect people to laugh on MSNBC, although maybe they wouldn't as a way of, I don't know. But my point being that CNN is presumably sort of like the centrist network, as it were. And if James Comer can't go anywhere except for Fox News or News Nation or WorldNet Daily or America One or whatever all of those other, sort of right-leaning outlets are, without getting laughed at, they've got a real problem. They've got a real problem because it will, without a doubt, be a hassle for the Biden White House. Undoubtedly. It soaks up a bunch of resources. But it's arguably, I think, the best thing that could happen to them electorally. And maybe too for the Democrats in the House. It will certainly help 80%, 90% of the Republicans in the House. But this entire country and all of like electoral and political control is now a function of like the 10%.
Yeah.
Less, probably. I don't know. I can't do the numbers. 18 seats in out of 435. That's 20. That's 5%.
And it's also notable that the way Comer and Jim Jordan have talked about this, where they've been like, I would vote to impeach him tomorrow. Whereas guys like Don Bacon, a Republican in Nebraska, who has changed his mind on voting for the impeachment inquiry, it's very clear that he's like, I'm voting for the inquiry because they're stonewalling us and we need more info. I am not voting to impeach Joe Biden.
Right.
I'm voting for the inquiry.
Well, it'll be interesting too with those frontline Republicans in those 16 districts that Biden won. What they're going to do in terms of like if they actually bring this forward and voting for impeachment, their margins are even slimmer if they're moving forward with this, with Kevin McCarthy leaving in a few months and George Santos.
Santos gone, then Bill Johnson in Ohio leaves to take a university position that's 3 down.
It would be hilarious if it failed.